I like the fact that we're able to talk about the whole of Africa. I don't know if you have suggestions on which countries you want us to target. Just suggest them very nicely on the comment section. I'm sure we're going to bring in some beautiful stories. I like this fact that we can, as English-speaking people, engage into discussion on countries where people speak French, as a national language. I know it's very sad to say that Africa has been divided into many different portions. Some countries that speak English, like Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe. French-speaking countries, Gabon, Cameroon, Algeria, Tunisia, and all that stuff. Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and Portuguese-speaking countries. We're not supposed to be that way. Actually, Africans should have their own language. And I understand English is the reason why a Kenyan person can communicate with a South African, a Zimbabwean can communicate with a Zambian. But it shouldn't be like that. I think Africans should have their own language. Many people believe Swahili is the language to go for because Swahili is the most spoken language in Africa. Swahili is massive, spoken in Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Congo, Burundi, so many, northern Mozambique, so many places. So it's a lot of Kenya. Did I say Kenya? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Anyway, we are in Burkina Faso. You remember the story about Burkina Faso? We're not going to get back into the details of it. The foreign minister of Burkina Faso went to the United Nations to express himself. The United Nations, that office where people come and they wait nicely and they speak, and nobody listens and they go. Then they speak, and nobody listens and they go. Until America speaks, then everybody listens. That's the United Nations. Nobody listens to you. You just spend money, taxpayers' money and go speak out. Now, Burkina Faso foreign minister addressed on Monday the United Nations General Assembly, and he was very clear. He said his country's been fighting against terrorist groups for the past few years. And he said nearly 70% of the territory is now under the control of the government from 40% in 2022. So in 2022, while the French soldiers, I remember sometime French was supposed to be like number 4 force in the world, like the strongest army. In 2022, French soldiers were in Burkina Faso, supposedly fighting against terrorists. Burkina Faso only held 40% of its own land, and 60% was with the end of the terrorists. But now that they kicked out the French to take over their own lands and weapons and arms, they've taken over 70%. Congratulations. We need to clap hands for those people. Yeah, I know. So now, Foreign Minister Traoré called out what he termed as propaganda against Burkina Faso Defense Force. Why does he say that? Because very lately, Burkina Faso was accused of unaliving civilians, unaliving people that are just normal human beings, because they were opposed to the fact that the new people in power were looking to stay in power forever. Let me just explain to you. Okay, so Burkina Faso is a country where they toppled the president. Okay, because the president was supporting France and they don't want France anymore. Now, these youngsters, young men, soldiers took over the country and they've been fighting terrorist group. Now, lately, they discovered that some people were trying to organize coup d'etat in the country, meaning to overthrow them as well. So what happens is sometimes you take those people, you put them in jail. Sometimes you don't have time to put them in jail. You unalive them. That's unfortunately what happens. And apparently some of those people were doing the bad things. Now, obviously, human rights sections and all that stuff that most of the time don't say anything when things are really bad. It's only when somebody takes initiative to change things around that you're violating human rights. Nah, you're not supposed to unalive that person who was trying to bomb your ass. Anyway, so he says people are trying to dent the image of the Burkina Faso force. They are working hard for the people.
Mr. President, at this very moment, we are notching up successes in our offensive against obscurantist forces, against the acolytes that have a questionable, shady reputation. At the same time, we're seeing that we are the victims of a defamation and smear campaign being waged against our soldiers. They are being accused of violating human rights without the slightest smidge of evidence being brought forward. This propaganda has been cobbled together and aims to lower the morale of Burkina Faso patriots and to sabotage their legitimate struggle.
And then, before he finished, he reiterated his country's accusation against Ukraine as support of terrorists in Sahel. Why does he say that? He said that because very recently, Ukrainians attacked Wagner in Mali. And by attacking Wagner in Mali, they unalive Wagner and Malian soldiers. Obviously, some of us don't understand. Mali, this is Mali. Here's the map. Mali also has terrorists like Burkina Faso and Niger. Put the map. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. They are terrorists there. These countries have thrown away France. That's what they didn't comment. France is not there anymore. France soldiers are gone. Bye-bye. They've called in the Russians. The Russians are helping them with weapons, ammunition, training, security, information, and stuff like that. Now, very recently, there was a massive ambush by Ukrainian soldiers against Wagner Group in Mali. They unalived Russians and unalived Malian soldiers, many of them. So, in other words, Ukrainians supported the terrorists in that country. So the country accused at the United Nations. They say Ukraine is a supporter of terrorists. I mean, if you have beef with Russians, go fight Russians in Ukraine. That's what you do. You don't go to somebody else's country to go and finish your issues. That just doesn't make sense. You should be able to do that. It's just absolutely crazy. In solidarity, both Niger and Burkina Faso also condemned Ukraine. They kicked out the ambassadors of those countries. These are the only African countries that did something about it. The rest of the African countries, yeah. Nobody said a word after many Malians were unalived by Ukrainians. This is unacceptable. I mean, this is another continent. You can't go to somebody else's continent and say, yeah. And by the way, the Ukrainian security service claimed that action. They say, we gave the terrorist intelligence to hit the Malians.
The fact that the rebels received the necessary information that allowed them to conduct a successful operation against Russian war criminals, the whole world has already seen this. In principle, this can be commented on. We certainly will not disclose any details, but let's say there will be a continuation. This is sensitive information. Therefore, everything that Ukraine does is happening within the limits and within the framework of international law, taking into account all the necessary procedures.
That's the problem. So he expressed himself. Props to them. Congratulations. You clap hands. Let's clap hands. Let's clap hands for Burkina Faso. Now, we're going to go to Japan. You know this place we talk about all over the world. We're going to Japan. Here's Japan. Now, the Japanese Prime Minister is doing something absolutely insane. The Japanese Prime Minister is calling for deployment of US nuclear weapons in Japan. That's crazy, isn't it? For a country that went through this, look at that. That's Hiroshima. And this. That's Nagasaki. That is in Japan. They bombed them with nuclear weapons. Now they're asking the very same country that bombed them with nuclear weapons to put nuclear weapons in the country. Talking about being mentally forgetful, or what do you call that disease when you forget everything? It's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, you should be advocating for none of that to happen. Up until today, many people in Japan are born with stigmas, and not stigma, but the physical, crazy stuff, which are, caused by radiation years and years and generations after. When they bombed Japan, they didn't bomb military station or military base. They bombed the population. And now this prime minister is forgotten because he's got some issues with China. The deployment of nuclear weapons in Asia-Pacific region should be discussed during the revision of agreement of the status of the United States contingent in Japan. He also called for a creation of a country's own nuclear arsenal to strengthen national security. So according to Shiba, the absence of a collective self-defense system similar to that of NATO in Asia creates a risk of military conflict. So the Japanese Prime Minister is saying, let's create NATO bar Asia. So NATO Asia. To counter who? We're going to find out very quickly. Who does he want to counter? He says the geopolitical crisis surrounding our country has reached a point where war could break out at any moment. We need an Asian version of NATO to deter the nuclear alliance of China, Russia, and North Korea. Now, this guy's been very bold, the Japanese Prime Minister. I mean, a few days ago, they shot flares at Russian airplane. You believe that? Like a Japanese airplane shot flares at a Russian airplane. That's very close to a beginning of a war. You don't do that. You can bring your flight. If we are crossing your lanes, we can come and ask to escort you out. You know, it's called interception. I can intercept a flight going through a perimeter that does not belong to the flight, that belongs to our country, and ask him to leave. You escort them out. You don't shoot flares. They're getting very bold. Let me remind you here, World War II, Japan got very bold and went and bombed America. And after that, they were annihilated. They didn't start the war. Hitler started the war. Unquote. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. So thank you very much. In recap, we have Burkina Faso speaking out at the United Nations. You know, United Nations, where people come and show off. Only a few people were very brave to speak out the truth on the United Nations. That's Mohammed Gaddafi. That's tore that little paper, say, go F yourself. You think this is your house. We are not second citizen. And Mugabe that told them we are tired. We've been asking and asking and begging for reform.
We come to the United Nations, it's ceremonial. Every year, September, we are there. We pay lots of money to go there. And to the General Assembly, we make speeches, we go back home, year in, year out. But the bosses in the Security Council say, you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked. And asked and asked. Reform.
We miss him. God bless.